Ready to go? Thank you all. Hey, thank you. Could I get your attention? Thank you all for coming today. Pleasure to be here today. I'm Jack Belcher, CIO in Arlington County. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate and bring attention to the International Day of Disabled Persons. The annual observance of the International Day of Disabled Persons was proclaimed in 1993 by the United Nations General Assembly. In fact, they've made this the theme of future is accessible as their theme going forward. You know, we have so little data on the state of those who are disabled, but we know this, that 1 out of every 7 persons, or 15% of the population, has some sort of disability. And the point of this meeting is to create awareness in terms of what that means for us as a community. And we're quite fortunate that we have such support from the county leadership as regards this. Just to acknowledge the board members who are here today. I believe Ms. Crystal's here, Mr. Gutschall, Matt's here, Libby. Thank you all. And of course, we have Christian Dorsey here. And our county leadership is here from the manager's office. The tall, suntanned person you may not recognize is Mark Schwartz. It's the first time I've seen him with a suntan in how many years we've been together? Which means you need more work-life balance, I think, is what it's coming to. We have our department leadership. Also from the manager's office, we have Shannon Flanagan-Watson, Lynn Porfuri's here, Barna Haufer, Jim Schwartz. And from the managers, from our department heads, if I missed somebody here as I'm going around the room, we have Aaron Miller from Emergency Management. We have Dave Paulitz from the Police Department. We have Jay Farr, from the Fire Department, Jay Farr from the Police Department, Marcy Foster from Human Resources. We have Jane from Parks and Recreation. Who am I missing here? Any other leadership? Michelle Cowan. Michelle, there she is hiding in the back. Yeah. So thank you all for being here today. So saying no more, I want to introduce the chairman of the county board, Honorable Christian Dorsey, who's going to read a proclamation.
Thank you, and it's so good to see everyone here this morning. And Jack, I'm surprised you didn't mention my suntan. Just take it for granted, don't you? So it is my pleasure to, first of all, congratulate the lead employee resource group and for everyone who was involved in putting this event together. Kate, thank you very much for extending the invitation for me to join you and to read this proclamation. I will do so at this point. In recognition of the International Day of Disabled Persons, whereas there are more than 6 million people with disabilities working in communities in the United States, and whereas individuals with disabilities possess many skills and talents that contribute to the success of our country's workforce, and whereas December 3rd is recognized as International Day of the Disabled Person, and whereas Arlington County strives to recruit and hire individuals with disabilities and to provide reasonable accommodations to current employees with disabilities, and whereas Arlington County joins the United States Department of Labor to celebrate the contributions of American workers with disabilities and to raise awareness of the issues faced by workers and job seekers with disabilities, now therefore I, Christian Dorsey, Chair of the County Board of Arlington, Virginia, do hereby proclaim this day, December 3rd, 2019, as International Day of Disabled Persons in Arlington, and encourage our residents to recognize the talents and abilities that individuals with disabilities bring to our workplaces. Now, this sort of cements this day as something that is important in Arlington County, but I think it goes without saying that this is not a subject that is only important on one day of the year. If we are truly to live up to our vision of being an equitable and inclusive community, the spirit that is involved with this proclamation and this day has to be imbued in our spirit all year long. And it's something that we strive to do. Hopefully we're doing it successfully, and hopefully we can continue to do it even more. You know, one of the things that I'm struck by in thinking about disability awareness in our country is looking back on my lifetime. When I was a young child, it was deemed impolite to recognize or to observe someone who had an obvious physical disability. In fact, it was something that people just didn't want to talk about, they wanted to avoid. But as you think about our community, and 1 in 4 persons having a disability that has been known, diagnosed, and observed, probably many more who do have a disability, this is not something that we should avoid talking about or dealing with. In fact, we should recognize that this is a part of the fabric of our community and, in fact, makes our community what it is. And therefore, recognizing that disabled persons contribute so much to our life and deserve every bit what we can deliver from a county government and from a community is something that hopefully we continue to evolve and grow to deal with very well. So I am just thrilled to be a part of this afternoon, and I look forward to the rest of the program. Thank you all very much.
You know, this program wouldn't be possible without the work of the lead employee resource group. And I asked Kate Bobby if she could ask the folks from that group that are here today to stand up and just so you can see who they are. Thank you. This group's been together a little more than a year, if that, and they've done amazing work in just such a short time, so thank you so much. So with that, I'd like to introduce Anna Maynard to come forward. Anna is an EEO investigator in our Human Rights Office and has been acting Disabilities Coordinator. Anna will address the accommodation program Arlington County has in place for its employees.
Thank you. Thank you all. Well, good morning. This is a great event. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm glad that Kate invited me to talk a little bit about what our reasonable accommodation process is here in Arlington County and how we can help employees with disabilities to do the jobs that they need to do every day and help departments also solve issues to make sure that people are able to come to work and participate and be successful in their employment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what our process is because I have been doing this role for a few months and used to do it several years prior to that. But before I get started, I'm going to introduce to you our brand new Disability Resources Coordinator, Courtney Sales, just joined us yesterday. Yay. We're very glad she's here, and we didn't think it was fair really to make her come and do a presentation on her second day. Had it been the third day, she would be here, but second day we thought we'd give her a break. So, but this is Courtney, and we're excited that she's with us here in Arlington. Make sure I'm pressing the right button. Okay, so the Office of Human Rights, just so you know who we are and where we are, we're located at the end of this hallway next to voter registration in Suite 318. You're welcome to come visit us anytime. We have a little neat doorbell with a camera and everything, so we're happy to have visitors. As I said, Courtney is our brand new Disability Resources Coordinator, and you can find more information on AC Commons, which I'm going to show you some neat pictures and stuff later about where you can find information about who we are and what we do. So one of our responsibilities is to make sure that we are in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the Americans with Disabilities Act is really a civil rights law for people with disabilities. This was a landmark law back in 1990, 1991 when it came into effect, which seems like not that long ago, but was kind of a long time ago now. But I was there when it happened. And it is a law that really empowered people with disabilities to have access to employment, to public accommodations, to local government, to curb cuts and ramps and bathrooms and job accommodations and all of those things. This was a really big deal when it passed, and we really strive to make sure that we are living up to the spirit of the ADA. So what is a reasonable accommodation? It's simply just a change, a modification in how things are normally done that can enable a person with a disability to perform the essential functions of the job. So it is essentially alterations or change or switching things around to enable a person to come to work and do the job that they need to do. One of the things that the ADA requires and that we take very seriously in Arlington is the interactive process. That simply means that this is an engagement. The employee comes to us and says, I have a need, I'm having an issue, I have a problem doing my job, or maybe the manager says, I have an employee I think needs some assistance, and we work together. It's a partnership between the employee, our department, and the manager to try to find a solution that solves the problem. And this is a really important part of the ADA and something that we really want to engage in to make sure that we're providing accommodations that are both good for the employee and good for the business in the department. So this is really an important concept that we take really seriously in our office. So who can get an accommodation? Well, almost anybody. Applicants for employments, temporary employees, probationary employees, contract employees, seasonal workers. Anybody who has a disability that is covered under the ADA can come to us and talk to us about getting an accommodation, and we'll work with that person to make sure they're able to perform the essential functions of the job. So that's what it's all about, is some way that might need some sort of an alteration, but the goal is to help that person do the essential functions that they're here to do. So kind of the process. We try to make this as simple as possible. We want it to be easy and transparent for everybody. So essentially, you make contact with our office. You make contact with the Disability Resources Coordinator. You can call, you can stop by, you can send an email. We do have a form on AC Common. I'm going to show you in just a second where you can find that. But you make some kind of a contact with us and say, I think I need some help. I have some issue that's preventing me from being able to perform some important parts of my job. I need some assistance. The coordinator is going to talk to the employee about what's going on, maybe obtain some documentation that helps them better understand what the accommodation needs are, and then connect with the management in the department and find out what their concerns are, what the job requires, what they think they can do, and come together, all of the parties, and figure out what's an accommodation that's going to work for this situation. So accommodations are always made on a case-by-case basis. Everybody is an individual, every need is different, jobs are different, department needs are different, so we have to look case by case and figure out what's going to work best for this person. There's no cookie-cutter solution to any one of these issues, but we always try to see what we can do to make it work for everybody. So where can you find information? Everybody knows this, AC Commons, right? If you click on Internal Resources, and then we have a little tile there now, Human Rights EEO and ADA. You click on that, you'll find a page for reasonable accommodation. There's a form there. Click that, fill out the form. It comes directly to Courtney. She will get in touch with you and start the process, talk to you about what your needs are, and help you out. You can also call her, extension 3559, write that down. She's in the email system too, so look her up, or you can just stop by. So we want to be open. We want to make sure people can access us and get the services that they need. Any questions about? Oh, some good resources. Our page, Job Accommodation Network, is a fantastic resource for accommodation information. There's a lot of good stuff there. And ada.gov has some good technical assistance for managers and departments as well. Are we doing questions now, or?
After Mary goes,
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
So now I'd like to introduce Maribel Contreras. Come and talk a little bit about how you manage employees and how you can find ways to work with people who have disabilities. Maribel?
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to talk just briefly about, from an HR side, I guess, and the employer side, how we work together with an employee to do these accommodations and how to make it successful in the end. So just talking about a little bit about how to explore some options that we have. Anna mentioned the JAN network, which is an excellent resource for so many things that you sometimes don't realize that are obvious, and simple little accommodations that can go a long way. also about implementing, how we implement the process and what we look at, and how to monitor the employee in the workplace, and also just the end result is for the accommodation and the employee and the employer to have a successful outcome. Oh, I guess I do have the clicker, I apologize. I will click going forward. So in the workplace, sometimes when the request comes through, many times the supervisor is taken a little bit aback because you don't know what to expect, or a lot of times we like, oh no, right? So there's a lot of things that are very simple that can be accommodated. 90% of the time, an accommodation is something that is reasonable. It costs under $500 to make small adjustments or rearrangements, and it allows the employee to continue to perform their essential workplace, their essential job functions. What an accommodation should not do is cause undue hardship, remove the essential job functions from an employee's position, or create additional workload for another. So sometimes that's the perception that is taken, that it's going to cause this hardship on everybody. And in reality, it does not. So some of the modifications can be equipment, adjusting a desk, a chair, providing a specific parking space, sometimes an armrest, a keyboard rest, some things in that regard. We also have things like allowing some privacy space. So sometimes employees request an accommodation because they have to administer during the workday medication and need that extra space. Sometimes it's just they get distracted with noise. There's noise canceling, headphone sets, things that are within reason. As Anna mentioned, this is looked at on a case-by-case basis, so it's not going to always be the same for everyone. We also have things like adjusting sometimes work schedule. People sometimes also with medications or just transportation have a little more difficulty and may need to adjust their work schedule to a little later time or earlier time or vice versa. Also breaks, if they need to administer medications or some other things, instead of having 2 15-minute breaks, maybe we can have 4 7-8-minute breaks. And so still the same amount of time versus on the breaks, but just in more intervals. And those are some simple accommodations that we can provide in the workplace. So implementing the accommodation plan, who's involved? Well, obviously, we start with the communication from the employee who puts in a request for the accommodation. The accommodations can sometimes be a temporary accommodation or can be a permanent accommodation based on the situation. It's a team effort, so there's a dialogue with the employee, with the supervisor, and the ADA accommodator to help look at what are our options to address the issue. We also use, as we mentioned, the Job Accommodation Network, which provides so many resources on materials, equipment, different tools to provide in the workplace. So we review the request. We also review the job description. We identify what the limitation is, and the employer and the employee work together for the best decision that's going to allow them to continue to perform in their jobs. So not all accommodations produce the desired outcome, but the majority do, as I mentioned, about 90% do. We always have the opportunity to try something and see if it works for the employee and to evaluate at a certain period of time. So normally we try to do what I consider a 30-day, a 90-day, 180-day, and then usually an annual review. Most of the practices for these accommodations is enhanced by kind of the collaboration. So it does take both the responsibility of the employee and also the supervisor to make it to be successful. We look at adjusting if the accommodation that was set is not something that's working out, then we try to adjust it, and that's why you kind of monitor it. There should be communication, check-ins with the employee. You know, when the plan is put in place, to see if it's the best decision that we made. And if not, we go back to the drawing board a little bit and look for the best accommodation. I think that there should be, depending on the situation or the accommodation request, there should be at least an annual review, whether it's needed to be continued or not, assuming that the ADA coordinator does that. In the end, what we want is for the accommodation to be successful, both for you, the manager, the employer, and the employee. And with little simple things, we can make it be successful. So some of the key to success is that communication from the employee when they put in their request, specifying exactly what they are looking for and what they need. Sometimes they know that they need an accommodation, but they themselves are not even sure what would work. That collaboration is the best option to look at how we make a decision and what we have out there as resources. And also, produce a positive and productive workplace for all employees. That's a current employee or a new employee that's coming on board. I think once we put all of these keys together, we kind of put a puzzle together and get the end result to be successful. So that's all I have. Thank you. Oh, sure.
Anna, you want to come on up? This is an opportunity for anyone to ask questions of Hannah or Mary Bell. Any questions people would have? Okay, let me start off by one.
Okay.
Good.
Some things that I think people may not even think to ask, but thank you. So accommodations are confidential. Who has, if I needed to see Anna for an accommodation, who would have to know that there was an accommodation made for me?
So accommodations are confidential to the extent possible. Medical information, any kind of documentation about a person's disability is confidential. That remains in our office and is not shared. And we do encourage employees who need to request an accommodation to not share that information outside of, to share it with our office so that we can maintain that strict confidentiality and protect privacy. Now, the accommodation itself, what is in place, is shared with those who need to know it. The employee, the employee's manager, possibly anybody else within the department who needs to be aware of some alteration that is occurring. But beyond that, it is not shared widely. And certainly the reason for the accommodation is confidential.
Can someone receive an accommodation, for example, if you parent a child with special needs or with a disability? Is that something they can work with you for if that requires some type of telework or FMLA, or are those two very different?
Well, FMLA is a completely separate process. Yes, the question is, can you get an accommodation to care for a family member? And does FMLA cover that? FMLA is a complete, Family Medical Leave Act is FMLA. That's handled completely separately, and that's about leave, job-protected leave. We can certainly talk to you about that if an employee has a concern like that and discuss whether or not we could provide a reasonable accommodation in those circumstances. Okay.
Following on that, my question was similar to what Kate was asking. As a manager, supervisor, how do we proactively address issues like this? Sometimes a person may be too proud or unaware to raise the issue, maybe a cognitive disability, and we sense it. How do you approach a subject like that with somebody while still respecting their privacy and confidentiality?
Right. Well, so we have to be careful. We cannot assume that somebody has a disability or needs an accommodation. Certainly, we can say to people, is there anything we can do to help you? We see you may be having difficulty performing these tasks or these issues. What can we do? Here are the resources available to you that we can try to assist you. And then allow the employee to determine what their needs are.
Are there any protections for or risks for an employee who reveals a need for accommodation when such an accommodation cannot be made?
So, certainly people are protected from requesting an accommodation. You are protected from any sort of retaliation for engaging in that process, bringing up the idea and saying, I think I may need an accommodation. and having that explored. If the accommodation, sometimes accommodations cannot be provided. Sometimes it is not reasonable, or it is an undue hardship, or too much of an alteration, or something can't be achieved. And that may be the outcome occasionally, but certainly the employee should not experience any sort of retaliation for having requested an accommodation. You have every right to engage in that process. Did I answer your question?
Well, I guess I would worry if I said I don't feel like I can do my job, and an accommodation cannot be made, but I've said I cannot do my job. Is my job at risk?
Well, all of us have to be able to perform the essential functions of our job. And if there is some sort of an accommodation that can allow you to do that, then that accommodation should be made. But ultimately, we all have to be able to perform our jobs. Right.
Yeah, how many requests do you get for accommodation in, a month or a year? And back to the other question, how many do you think you should be getting? In other words, is there unmet need that's really out there that we ought to be getting? So
I'm
curious.
gonna guess. I don't
expecting
I
it's a
don't know
guess.
for. I would say, let me just say, on average, a month. We probably get 3 or 4 a month. On average. How many actively we have going right now, I don't want to say. I'm just not sure. I'd have to really go and look. Probably there is some unmet need. I think there's always an unmet need that people are just not aware, or they don't realize that they could request an accommodation. They may realize there's something going on, but they haven't quite put together that maybe I have a disability that is causing these issues. So we always feel like we could do more to share the information, and it's something that actually we're actively working on, is getting that information out.
So if sometimes we have outside guests in that request an accommodation, does the Human Rights Office cover that, or who's responsible for that, like interpreters or large print or braille services?
We can certainly assist with that, with locating resources. The department that is hosting the event is responsible for coordinating it, providing the accommodation, but we're absolutely happy to help figure out what might be needed and how to get it, and finding resources, yeah.
So sort of a two-part question. Do we have any sense of accommodations that take place outside of the sphere of your office? Just an employee going directly to their manager saying, this is what would help me succeed, and that just being granted without any sort of a review process? And then the second part, do we have any sense of accommodations that have been made that have been determined to be just useful practices to just have available generally, so that it doesn't become a matter of accommodating, but something that's a more effective provision in the workforce?
So for the first question, that definitely does happen. We usually hear about it after the fact, or sometime down the road. If things may get more complicated, they'll come to us for assistance. We would like for everything to just kind of come through us, just so we're aware of it and can track it and be aware of what's going on. But we don't want to make it complicated or get in the way at all. And if a manager and an employee come together and they can work out a solution and go on and life is good, that's great. We're not going to try to gum up the works, for sure. But we would appreciate just, hey, a heads up, this is what we are doing in our department, so that we can just be aware and track it, and maybe have better statistics on what kind of accommodations we're doing, what kind of disabilities we're serving, things like that. But we certainly don't want to make it complicated for people. The second question.
Just more kind of piggybacking off of the first, sometimes you have accommodations that are made that are just
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things like flexible work schedules, telework, alternate schedule, things like that, those are very frequent. Certain kinds of ergonomic chairs and keyboards and standing desks, which are requested quite often, are coming our way for everybody as an option. Those kinds of things just make life easier for people. A lot of people have situations that might not rise to the level of a disability, but certainly can benefit from flexibility in their schedules, or a different kind of chair, different kind of keyboard, different sort of workspace configurations, things like that. And it does seem like those things have sort of rolled into the mainstream a little bit more. Yeah, for sure.
Is there a definition for undue hardship? And if there isn't a formal definition, how is that determined?
So there is a formal definition of an undue hardship. It's a fundamental alteration in the nature or the practice of the work or the business, or an extraordinary expense to the business that would make it not feasible to provide the accommodation. Those are always determined on a case-by-case basis. One of the things that we do kind of tell departments is when we're talking about cost, and like Maribel said, most accommodations are zero cost or very low cost. Rarely are they very expensive, but sometimes it could be equipment or something that somebody needs. And the department may say, well, like our human rights office, our budget is this big and we can't afford that. But we look at the budget of the county and what can the county do. And any employer, anytime we look from, I won't get into investigations, but anytime we look at that, we don't look at, the office that the person worked in, but how much does Verizon have to spend and what could they have done? So the financial piece is a little bit of a harder argument to make, but it's not impossible. It can be made. But the fundamental alteration of the nature of the business or the work that needs to be done can sometimes occur if the accommodation is such that it would not allow the person to perform the job, or the work would not get done, or it would have to be done by other people that can't manage it, things like that. Okay.
Maybe a question for Maribel. Are HR liaisons or supervisors available to provide support? For example, I'm on a team of 6 people. I'm on a team of 6 people, and I have an accommodation. So is there support available from liaisons or the EEO office so that that can go as seamlessly as possible for the whole team? Because no matter how much an employee may not want whatever their disability may be to affect their coworkers, the fact is sometimes it does. So is there support available to make that go as easily as possible?
Yeah. A lot of times in the HR world, through FMLA or through other things with the employee, we become aware of that. And so Anna and I have worked together a lot in the past, and we are in coordination with that. So sometimes the employee hasn't put in the request, but they'll come to us for some questions or guidance on that. That's one of the first things we ask them to do, is to put in that request so that we can start working together. So absolutely, we're there to help answer questions, and we are sometimes the first ones to receive informally the request. Basically, they're asking the questions, they're asking for guidance, but it's really the request that they need to submit. So. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate our employees with disabilities, to learn more about supporting coworkers with a disability and working with us as we move forward in supporting employees with disabilities. Please join us in the back. There'll be some light refreshments. Katie? Please. Kate, you want to come up? Thank you. Kate? Kate, you want to have some closing remarks? Yes.
Thank you all again for being here. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm really loud. As the statistics in the brochure can show you, there are many, many people with disabilities. It's anywhere between 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 people. But many of those people are perfectly and expertly able to do jobs that any non-disabled person could do. So what we are hoping to do is to bring awareness of disabilities, to help you realize that if 1 in 4 people have a disability, or even 1 in 5, there are quite a few people in this room that do, that you work with rather seamlessly quite often. So it's not an impossibility. Arlington County is doing some hard work in recruiting for disabilities. The lead ERG is working with Lori Moore and the staffing team so that we are advertising our open positions with a variety of networks, including the JAN network, which both Maribel and Anna mentioned, as well as other initiatives. We're looking very
closely to working with Ms. Sales to do that as well. We also are working with Jack and the DTS staff. We are hoping to research what assistive technology may be helpful and useful, not just for employees, but also for visitors. We have plenty of people who come into just this building who may be hard of hearing or challenged with their mobility, and we could better serve them as we would better serve our employees. And as Anna already mentioned, and as I will probably mention again, Courtney Sales is here and is available. You will find that her number is listed in a special giveaway we have at the end, so that if you had questions about accommodations, that you could reach her. And finally, I would like to thank the other employee resource groups, outstanding, that supports our staff that identify as LGBT and also their allies. The Veterans Group, headed by Eric Grabowski, who is our wonderful photographer of the day. We also have Morel White here. She is president or co-president with Andre Talley of the Black Employee Councils group. It's not necessarily a new group, but it has new leadership and a new name, and we hope that anyone who is interested in participating in the support of and information about employees who identify as Black and allies thereof will support Morel and her group. We also have, I'm missing some, Alianza, which supports the Hispanic heritage employees and initiatives. Outstanding, I said Veterans Breck. AHA, Luan Wong is here. She is the vice president, also taking lovely photos. Thank you, Luan. And she's here representing the Asian Heritage Alliance. The last group I'd like to mention is the WOW, Women Workers, who lead. And they are doing a very special event that started at the end of 2019 and will go through 2020 in honor of the 19th Amendment and celebrating the women's right to vote. They have a special event coming up later in the month on December 11th. It's an advocacy boot camp for middle and high school students, which will have speakers and also activities and a I'm so sorry, I've lost my place. And they'll discuss other current issues such as Equal Rights Amendment ratification, pay equity, et cetera. But again, I very much appreciate everyone being here. Jack, thank you so much for emceeing. We do have a special giveaway with some tips and tricks that we hope that you will pick up. Also some coloring that goes with it. And we have a lovely reception that I hope everyone will enjoy. Thank you so much.